I knew my marriage was over not because of lipstick on a collar or a late-night text, but because of the kale smoothies. Greg, my husband of 20 years, had recently turned 47. And like clockwork, the midlife panic had set in. But Greg didn't buy a Porsche. He bought a Vitamix blender and a subscription to a longevity protocol that cost $400 a month. He was obsessed with optimizing himself. He dyed the gray out of his temples. He started wearing shirts that were 2 sizes too tight to show off his gym results. And he started looking at me. His 45-year-old wife who still enjoyed carbs and had laugh lines around her eyes, like I was a glitch in his operating system. It was a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. I was in the kitchen, organizing the stack of bills that Greg didn't have the bandwidth to deal with. I had put my own career in logistics on hold 15 years ago to raise our daughter, Sophie, and manage Greg's life so he could climb the corporate ladder at Apex Logistics. Greg walked in, adjusting his silk tie. He looked good. I hated that he looked good. "Here," I said, sliding his green sludge across the granite island. "Your immortality potion." He didn't smile. He didn't even look at the glass. He was staring at me. It wasn't a loving stare. It was a clinical assessment, like a health inspector looking at a restaurant kitchen that was about to be shut down. "Diana," he said. His voice was too calm. "Sit down." "I can't. The contractor is coming at 9 to look at the gutters, and I have to." "Stop," he interrupted. "Just stop. This is what I'm talking about. The gutters, the bills, the mundane, heavy drag of it all." I froze. "Excuse me? That drag is called running a household, Greg." He walked around the island. He smelled of expensive cologne and ozone. He stopped 3 feet from me, maintaining a distance that felt like a quarantine. "I'm leaving, Diana." I laughed. It was a reflex. "Leaving for the conference in Denver? You haven't packed yet." "No," he said, and his eyes were dead cold. "I'm leaving the marriage. I've leased a condo downtown. I'm moving out today." The air left the room. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Is there someone else?" Greg sighed, the way one sighs at a slow child. "Her name is Kylie. She's vibrant. She has energy, Diana. She has a future." "Kylie," I repeated. The name sounded like bubblegum popping. "Who is she?" "An intern." "She's a barista," he said, lifting his chin defiantly. "At the coffee shop near the office. And before you start with the judgments, she's studying interior design. She's 23. I felt like I'd been slapped. 23? Greg, she's 3 years older than our daughter. She's a child. She's alive, he snapped. She looks at the world with wonder. You look at the world like it's a checklist of chores." He stepped closer, and then he delivered the line that would etch itself into my brain like acid on glass. He looked at my face, scanning the soft skin of my neck, the crow's feet, the sensible cardigan I was wearing. "Look, Diana, let's be real. You were great for the first phase of my life, the building phase, but I'm in the optimization phase now. And frankly," he gestured vaguely at my entire body, "you're expired goods. I need fresh produce. You understand, don't you? Expired goods." I didn't scream. I didn't throw the kale smoothie in his face. I went numb. It's a defense mechanism, I think. When the trauma is too big, the brain just shuts off the lights. "Get out," I whispered. "My lawyers will send over the separation agreement," he said, checking his Apple Watch. "I'm taking the Tesla. You keep the SUV. It's better for hauling groceries anyway." He walked out the door without looking back. Chapter 2. The Erased Woman. The next 3 months were a blur of humiliation. Greg wasn't just cruel, he was efficient. He had been planning this for months. He had quietly moved assets, restructured accounts, and set up a narrative with our friends that we had grown apart, and that I was bitter because I had been a stay-at-home mom for 15 years. I had no income. The joint accounts were frozen pending the divorce settlement. Greg's lawyer, a shark named Marcus, offered me a pitiful monthly stipend that barely covered the mortgage on the house Greg had left me with. A house I couldn't afford to heat. I needed a job. I dusted off my resume. Diana Sterling, MBA, University of Washington, class of 2002. It looked impressive until you looked at the dates. My last real job was in 2008. In the tech and logistics world, 2008 might as well be the Stone Age. I went to interview after interview. We're looking for someone a bit more digital native, a 20-something HR manager told me, glancing at my suit, which was definitely out of style. You're overqualified for the junior role, but underqualified for the senior role due to the gap, another recruiter said, circling the 15-year hole in my CV where I had raised a human being and managed a household. I was invisible. I was a ghost in a pantsuit. One rainy afternoon, feeling particularly masochistic, I drove to the city. I went to the coffee shop near Greg's office, the Bean and Leaf. I sat in the corner with a newspaper, hiding behind sunglasses. I saw her, Kylie. She was undeniable. She had waist-length blonde hair, skin that glowed without makeup, and a laugh that carried across the room. She was wearing a crop top and leggings. She looked like a fitness influencer. Greg walked in. He looked like a man trying desperately to fit into a fraternity party he was too old for. He kissed her over the counter. She giggled and wiped foam off his nose. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I saw tired eyes. I saw Mom. I saw expired goods. I went home and cried until I threw up. But then, something happened. Chapter 3, The Box in the Attic. I was packing up the house. I had to sell it. I couldn't afford the property taxes on Greg's stipend. I was in the attic, sorting through old boxes, when I found a dusty plastic bin labeled Diana, grad school/early work. I opened it. Inside were old notebooks, floppy disks, God, I was old, and a leather-bound journal. I opened the journal. It was from 2005. At that time, I was a logistics analyst for a shipping company. Greg was just a junior sales rep. I started reading. The pages were filled with equations, diagrams, and code snippets. I remembered. Back then, Greg was struggling to meet his sales quotas. He couldn't figure out how to optimize the shipping routes for his clients to save them money. I had stayed up for 3 weeks straight, drinking Red Bull, and I had written an algorithm for him. A routing algorithm that cut fuel costs by 15%. He had presented it to his boss as his idea. He got promoted. I got a high five and a dinner at Olive Garden. I kept reading. There were more ideas. Ideas for supply chain automation. Ideas that were radical in 2005 but were standard now. And then, on the last page, I found it. A project I had sketched out right before I got pregnant with Sophie. Project Velocity. It was a concept for a predictive AI model for last-mile delivery. Back then, the technology didn't exist to build it. I had shelved it. But now, I sat on the dusty attic floor, the journal in my lap. I looked at the diagrams. The logic was sound. The math held up. I wasn't just a housewife. I wasn't just Sophie's mom. I was the one who had built the engine that Greg had been driving for 20 years. He thought he was the genius because he knew how to sell it. But I was the architect. I stood up. My knees popped. Okay, maybe I was getting older, but my brain felt sharper than it had in a decade. Greg worked for Apex Logistics. They were the market leader, but they were bloated, slow, and arrogant. Just like Greg, there was a competitor, Nexus Freight. They were smaller, scrappier, and struggling to eat into Apex's market share. I grabbed the journal. I grabbed my laptop. Expired goods. I whispered to the empty attic. Watch me. Chapter 4. The interview. Getting a meeting at Nexus Freight wasn't easy. I didn't have a network anymore, so I did something desperate. I stalked the CEO, David Chun, on LinkedIn. I saw he was speaking at a Women in Logistics mixer at a hotel downtown. I bought a ticket for $150. Money I needed for groceries. I put on my best suit. I watched YouTube tutorials on how to apply modern makeup. I cornered him by the buffet table. Mr. Chun. He looked polite but bored. Yes. My name is Diana Sterling. I know your company is losing 4% margin on the I-5 corridor routes because you're using static routing instead of dynamic predictive modeling. He stopped chewing his shrimp canopy. Excuse me? You're bleeding money on fuel because your trucks are waiting in queues at the port of Tacoma. I know how to fix it. He narrowed his eyes. Who are you? Do you work for Apex? I used to be adjacent to Apex, I said carefully. I have a gap in my resume, David. A big one. But I have an algorithm in my head that can save you $10 million in Q1. All I want is a job. An entry-level analyst job. If I don't save you the money in 90 days, you can fire me. He looked at me. He saw a middle-aged woman with desperation in her eyes. But he was a businessman. He also saw greed. Monday morning, he said.
8 a.m.
Don't be late. Chapter 5, The Basement. I started at Nexus Freight on Monday. It was humiliating in a new way. My boss was a 26-year-old named Tyler who wore hoodies to work and called me ma'am. They put my desk in the bullpen, an open-plan office that smelled of energy drinks and AXE body spray. So, Diana, Tyler said, leaning on my desk, do you know how to use Slack? Or do you need me to set up your fax machine? The guys around him snickered. I can manage, Tyler, I said, opening my laptop. Just give me access to the raw shipping data. For 2 months, I was a ghost again. I arrived at 6 a.m. and left at 10 p.m. I missed Sophie, who was away at college, but I told her I was consulting. I pored over the data, coded. I learned Python watching videos at night because my coding skills were rusty. I drank so much coffee my hands shook. I was rebuilding Project Velocity. I kept tabs on Greg. He was living the high life. Apex Logistics had just landed a massive government contract. He was named Executive of the Year by a local business journal. The photo showed him beaming, with Kylie on his arm in a red dress. He sent me an email regarding the divorce settlement. Diana, let's wrap this up. I'm willing to give you the house if you waive alimony. I need the cash flow for new investments. Take the deal. You won't get better. I didn't reply. I printed the email and taped it to my monitor. Week 8 at Nexus. I found the anomaly. Apex was undercutting Nexus by using a loophole in carrier insurance regulations. It wasn't illegal, but it was risky. And their routing software, the one I wrote for Greg in 2005, was outdated. It couldn't handle real-time traffic adjustments. If I could launch Velocity, Nexus wouldn't just match Apex. We would obliterate their margins. I walked into Tyler's office. I need a meeting with David Chun, I said. Tyler didn't look up from his phone. David is busy, Diana. Go fix the spreadsheet formatting. I'm not asking, Tyler. I'm telling you. Look at this. I turned his monitor around and plugged in my drive. I ran the simulation. On the screen, 2 lines moved across a map of the U.S. The red line, Apex, got stuck in weather patterns in the Midwest. The blue line, Nexus/Velocity, rerouted automatically, predicting the storm before it hit, saving 12 hours and 18% fuel. Tyler stopped chewing his gum. Holy SHT. Chapter 6. The Climb. David Chin gave me the team. It was small at first, just me and 2 interns. But Velocity worked. In 6 months, Nexus Freight's profits jumped 20%. The industry started to whisper. Who was doing this? What was the new tech? David promoted me to Director of Strategy. I moved out of the bullpen and into an office. I bought a new suit, Armani. I still hadn't signed the divorce papers. Greg was getting annoyed. He called me one night. Diana, stop stalling. Kylie and I want to look at wedding venues. I need the assets unfreezing. I'm busy, Greg, I said, typing away on my other screen. Busy? Busy doing what? Knitting? Working. He laughed. Working? Did you get a shift at the library? Something like that. Send the papers again. I'll have my lawyer look at them. Your lawyer? You have a lawyer now. Goodbye, Greg. I hung up. I looked at the whiteboard in my office. At the top was written, Target, Apex. David Chin walked in. He looked serious. Diana, we have a problem. Apex is sniffing around. They know we're eating their lunch on the West Coast routes. They're planning a hostile maneuver to undercut our pricing. I smiled. I know they are. Greg, Sorry, Mr. Sterling at Apex relies on volume over efficiency. He'll try to flood the market. How do we stop them? David asked. We don't have the capital to fight a price war. We don't fight them on price, David, I said, standing up. We buy them. David choked on his coffee. By Apex? They're 5 times our size. Not for long, I said. Their stock is inflated. Their tech is 20 years old. And I happen to know that their CFO has been hiding debt in offshore subsidiaries to keep the stock price up for the executives' bonuses. How do you know that? Because, I said, picking up the dusty journal from 2005, I used to do their taxes. I looked David in the eye. Get the investors ready. We're going hunting. The takeover of a giant like Apex Logistics doesn't happen with a bang. It happens with a whisper. My office at Nexus Freight had changed. It was no longer a small glass box. It was a war room. The walls were covered in schematics of Apex's supply chain, a map I knew better than the veins in my own hands because I had helped draw it 20 years ago. David Chun sat opposite me, looking pale. We were about to do something crazy. We were going to short sell Apex stock right before launching our new product, Velocity Prime, which would render their entire business model obsolete. Are you sure about the debt, Diana? David asked, tapping his pen nervously. If we accuse them of hiding losses and we're wrong, they'll sue us into oblivion. I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. Greg, Mr. Sterling, is a creature of habit. When he's cornered, he hides things. He hides mistresses and he hides money. Check the subsidiary in the Cayman Islands called Blue Horizon. It's where they dump the fuel hedge losses. David made the call to our forensic accountants. 2 hours later, he came back, eyes wide. You were right. They're underwater by $40 million. If this gets out, their stock crashes. Good, I said, typing a command into my terminal. Let's help it along. That afternoon, Nexus announced Velocity Prime. We released a white paper proving that our AI-driven routing was 30% cheaper than Apex's legacy system. The industry reacted instantly. Nexus stock jumped 15%. Apex stock wobbled. Then, the whispers started about the accounting irregularities. I didn't leak them directly, that would be illegal. I simply directed analysts to ask the right questions during Apex's quarterly earnings call. I listened to the call from my office. Greg was on the line. We are, confident in our Q3 projections, Greg stammered. He sounded tired. The rumors of liquidity issues are baseless. Mr. Sterling, an analyst from Goldman Sachs pressed, can you explain the transaction volume with Blue Horizon Ltd? Silence. Dead air for 10 seconds. We'll have to get back to you on that, Greg mumbled. Apex stock dropped 12% in 10 minutes. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. Tasted like victory. Chapter 8. The Wedding Planner. While I was dismantling his empire, Greg was busy planning his wedding. He called me on a Friday night. I was in the office eating Thai takeout. Diana, you need to sign the papers, he barked. No, hello. No, how are you? Kylie found a venue in Napa. It's $50,000 for the deposit. I need the liquidity. $50,000? I asked, twirling a forkful of pad thai. That seems excessive, Greg, especially since your stock options just lost a quarter of their value today. Don't talk to me about the stock, he snapped. It's a market correction. It'll bounce back. Just sign the damn papers. Why are you dragging this out? Are you still hoping I'll come back? I laughed. It was a genuine belly laugh. Greg, I'd rather drink bleach. I'm dragging it out because my lawyer, Marcus, ironic name, isn't it? Says your initial offer is insulting. I want half, Greg. Half of the stock options. Half of the 401k. Half of the house. You're greedy, he spat. You didn't earn any of this. I worked 80-hour weeks while you sat at home. I raised your daughter, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. I managed your life, and I wrote the code that got you promoted in 2005. Remember that? Or did you delete that memory to make room for Kylie's birthday? You're delusional. Just sign, or I'll sue you for court costs. See you in court, Greg. I hung up. A notification popped up on my Instagram. Yes, I had Instagram now. The marketing team made me get it. It was a story from Kylie. She was crying. Hashtag wedding stress, hashtag groom is stressed, hashtag need vacation. I zoomed in on the photo. In the background, I saw Greg sitting at the kitchen table, my old kitchen table. He had his head in his hands. A bottle of whiskey was open next to him. He looked old. The fresh produced lifestyle was rotting him from the inside out. Chapter 9. The hostile bid. 3 months later. Apex stock was in freefall. The accounting scandal had blown open. The SEC was investigating. Clients were fleeing to Nexus in droves. It was time for the kill shot. David Chin walked into my office. He was wearing a tuxedo. Tonight's the night, Diana. The Apex annual gala. Are you ready? I stood up. I was wearing a dress I had bought in New York the week before. It was midnight blue, silk, and fit like a glove. I had cut my hair into a sharp chic bob. I didn't look like a mom anymore. I looked like a predator. I'm ready, I said. We weren't invited, of course. But when you own 8% of the company's stock, which Nexus had quietly acquired through shell companies over the last month, you get to crash the party. The gala was held at the Grand Hyatt. It was a somber affair. The champagne was flowing, but the mood was like a funeral. When David and I walked in, the room went quiet. Isn't that Diana Sterling? I heard a woman whisper. Greg's ex. She looks incredible, her husband muttered. I saw Greg. He was standing near the bar, looking frantic. He was arguing with Kylie. Kylie looked bored. She was scrolling on her phone, ignoring him. She wore a white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown. Tacky. Greg saw me. His jaw literally dropped. He pushed past Kylie and marched over to us. Diana? What the hell are you doing here? Security. Relax, Greg. David Chun stepped forward. We're shareholders. We have a right to be here. Shareholders. Greg laughed nervously. You guys are a pest. A gnat buzzing around a lion. Actually, I said, stepping forward. We're the new owners. Greg stared at me. What? Nexus Freight just filed a tender offer with the SEC, I said. My voice clear and loud enough for the board members nearby to hear. We're offering $15 a share to buy Apex. It's a 20% premium over your current tanking price. The board is going to accept it, Greg. They have a fiduciary duty to. Greg turned purple. You can't afford that. Nexus is tiny. Not anymore, I smiled. We have backing. And we have the technology. Your clients have already switched, Greg. We're just buying the carcass. Kylie walked up, looking confused. Babe, who is this? Is this the ex-wife? She looked me up and down. I saw the insecurity in her eyes. She saw the expensive dress, the confidence, the power. She realized suddenly that youth wasn't the only currency in the world. Hello, Kylie, I said pleasantly. Nice dress. Very bridal. Greg, what is she talking about? Kylie whined. Are you selling the company? No. Greg shouted. I am the CEO. I built this. You managed it. I corrected him. And you managed it into the ground. It's over, Greg. Chapter 10. The boardroom coup. The next morning, the emergency board meeting was held at Apex headquarters. I walked into the building I used to visit to bring Greg his lunch. The security guard, old Mr. Henderson, recognized me. Mrs. Sterling? He asked, confused. I didn't know you worked here. I do now, Mr. Henderson. I winked. I took the elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was packed. The Apex directors looked exhausted. They knew the ship was sinking. Greg sat at the head of the table. He looked like he hadn't slept. When I walked in with David and our team of lawyers, Greg stood up. This is a hostile takeover, he screamed. I will not allow it. Sit down, Greg, the chairman of the board said quietly. We've reviewed the offer. It's a lifeline. If we don't take it, we're bankrupt by Christmas. But her. Greg pointed a shaking finger at me. She's a housewife. She doesn't know anything about logistics. She's been out of the game for 15 years. I walked to the other end of the table. I placed my laptop on the mahogany surface. 15 years ago, I began addressing the board, not Greg. I wrote the routing algorithm that is the backbone of this company's success. Greg took credit for it. Since then, you haven't innovated. You've stagnated. I pulled up a slide. This is Velocity Prime. This already live at Nexus. This is why you're losing. And I built it. Me, the housewife. The board members murmured. They looked at the data. It was undeniable. If you accept the merger, I continued, Nexus will integrate this tech into Apex's infrastructure immediately. We save the company. We save the jobs. We save your investments. And what's the condition? The chairman asked. I looked at Greg. He was sweating. He knew what was coming. The condition, I said, is a change in leadership. We need a CEO who understands the future, not someone stuck in a midlife crisis. You can't fire me, Greg yelled. I have a contract. I have a golden parachute. Actually, David Chun interjected. We found the offshore accounts, Greg. The fraud invalidates your severance package. You're being terminated for cause. The room went silent. Greg looked around the table. He saw no allies. He saw only men and women who wanted to save their own skins. He looked at me. His eyes were pleading now. Diana, please, don't do this. I have a wedding to pay for. I have a mortgage on the condo. You should have thought about that, I said, my voice cold as ice. Before you decided I was expired goods. All in favor of the merger? The chairman asked. Every hand went up. Motion carried. Greg slumped in his chair. It was done. Chapter 11, The Walk of Shame. Security came to escort him out. It was poetic. I stood by the window of the CEO's office, my new office, technically, and watched. He walked out carrying a single box. He looked small. In the parking lot, I saw a familiar figure waiting. It was Kylie. She was leaning against the Tesla. They argued. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the body language. Greg threw his hands up. Kylie kicked the tire of the car. Then, she did something that made me almost feel sorry for him. Almost. She took the engagement ring off her finger. She threw it at his chest. She got into her own car, a little Fiat, and drove away, leaving him standing alone in the parking lot of the company he used to rule. He had lost the wife. He had lost the mistress. He had lost the company. He was optimized now. Optimized down to zero. I turned away from the window. David was standing there with a bottle of champagne. To the new CEO of Apex Nexus? He asked, pouring 2 glasses. No, I said, taking the glass. I don't want to be CEO. You run it, David. You're good at the politics. Then what do you want? I looked at the whiteboard where I had written my plan months ago. I want to be the chief technology officer, I said. I want to build. I want to create. And, I smiled. I want to buy my old house back. I think it's going to be on the market very soon. At a foreclosure price. The dust from the merger didn't settle. It hardened into concrete, trapping Greg underneath it. 2 months after the boardroom coup, I sat in a conference room at a title company. The air conditioning was humming, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. Across the table sat a bank representative. Greg wasn't there. He was too ashamed, or perhaps just too broke to afford the gas to drive here. He had granted power of attorney to the bank to liquidate his assets to pay off his mounting legal debts. Sign here, Miss Sterling, the agent said, sliding a stack of papers toward me. I signed. My hand didn't shake. I was buying my old house back. Our house. The one I had picked the tiles for. The one where Sophie took her first steps. But I wasn't paying market value. Because Greg had leveraged the house to pay for his engagement ring and the condo lease, and then defaulted on everything when his severance package was voided. The bank had foreclosed. I was buying it for 60 cents on the dollar. Congratulations, the agent said, handing me the keys. It's yours. Again. I drove to the house. The lawn was overgrown. The for sale sign was crooked. It looked neglected, just like I had felt a year ago. I walked inside. It was empty, echoing. Greg had taken the big TV and the leather recliner, but he had left the memories. I walked into the kitchen, the scene of the crime, the granite island where he told me I was expired goods. I ran my hand over the cold stone. I'm going to remodel this whole kitchen, I said aloud. Sledgehammers first. Chapter 13. The SEC and the Uber. Greg didn't just lose his job. He lost his career. The SEC investigation into the offshore accounts at Apex was swift and brutal. Because I had provided the forensic roadmap, they didn't have to dig deep. Greg wasn't arrested. He was a first-time offender and threw his CFO under the bus to avoid jail time. But his punishment was professional death. He was fined $2 million, and he was barred from serving as an officer or director of a public company for 10 years. He was a 50-year-old executive who wasn't legally allowed to be an executive. I heard rumors through the grapevine. He had moved into a basement apartment in Renton. He was driving for Uber because the Tesla had been repossessed. I tried not to feel smug. I mostly succeeded. One rainy Tuesday, I ordered a car to take me to the airport. I was flying to Tokyo to open our new Asian logistics hub. I tracked the car on the app. Driver Gregory. For 0.8 stars. My heart skipped a beat. No, couldn't be. The car pulled up. It was a dented Toyota Camry that smelled faintly of wet dog. The window rolled down. Our eyes met. Greg looked ravaged. The silver at his temples wasn't distinguished anymore. It was just gray. He hadn't shaved in days. He was wearing a stained hoodie. "Diana," he breathed. He looked like he wanted to shrink into the upholstery. "Hello, Greg," I said, standing on the curb in my trench coat, holding my Toomey luggage. I didn't check the name," he stammered. "I just accepted the ride. I can cancel. I'll cancel." "Don't be silly," I said, opening the back door. "I need to get to SeaTac, and you need the fare. Drive." The ride was excruciatingly silent. I watched the back of his head. I saw the tension in his shoulders. "How is Sophie?" he asked quietly, looking at me in the rearview mirror. "She's great. She made Dean's List. She asks about you, Greg. You should call her." I can't," he whispered. "Not like this." I told her I was consulting in Dubai. "I can't let her see me driving a Camry. She doesn't care about the car, Greg. She cares that her father abandoned her for a barista who dumped him 3 weeks later." He winced. "I know. God, I know. I was an idiot, Diana. I was terrified of getting old. And now look at me. I feel like I aged 20 years in 6 months." We pulled up to the Delta One curbside check-in. I got out. Greg popped the trunk and hesitated. He clearly didn't want the porters to see him struggling with my bags. "Leave it," I said. "I got it." I pulled my suitcase out. I turned to him. "I'm remodeling the kitchen," I said. He looked down at his sneakers. "That's good. You always hated that granite." "Greg," I said. He looked up. "You're not expired," I said softly. "You're just broken. And unlike goods, people can be fixed. But you have to do the work yourself. I can't optimize you anymore." I handed him a $100 bill as a tip. "Call your daughter," I said. I walked into the terminal without looking back. Chapter 14. The Young Gun. 6 months later. I was in my office at Apex Nexus. We kept the name. It tested well. I was the CTO, but David Chen treated me like a co-CEO. My assistant buzzed me. "Diana, there's a job applicant here. He insists on speaking with you. He says he knows you. Name, Tyler, from the old Nexus bullpen." I smiled. "Send him in." Tyler walked in. He was wearing a suit now, though it fit poorly. He looked nervous. "Hey, Diana, Ms. Sterling.
Itile.
What can I do for you? I thought you were happy in data science." "I am," he said, shifting his weight. "Actually, I'm here about my uncle. He needs a job. Badly. He sent in his resume for a warehouse manager position, but HR flagged it because he's overqualified and has a record with the SEC." I frowned. "Who is your uncle?" "Greg Sterling," Tyler said. "He's my mom's brother. We don't talk much, but he's in a bad way, Diana. He's sleeping on my mom's couch. He just needs a paycheck. Not an executive job. Just work. He knows logistics. I stared at Tyler. The irony was suffocating. Greg, the man who wanted fresh produce, was now begging for a job through the nephew he used to ignore. He wants to be a warehouse manager? I asked. Lifting boxes? Managing shifts? He says he'll do anything. He says he just wants to be useful again. I spun my chair around and looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. I thought about revenge. I had already had it. I had taken his company, his house, and his pride. Did I need to starve him too? Tell HR to unflag the application, I said. But Tyler. Yeah. Tell him he reports to the shift supervisor. Her name is Maria. She's tough. If he's late once, if he complains once, he's gone. No special treatment. Tyler grinned. He won't complain. He's terrified of you. Chapter 15. Epilogue. I spent Thanksgiving in my new old house. The kitchen was unrecognizable. Warm wood, soft lighting, open shelves. No cold granite. It smelled of turkey and sage. Sophie was home from college. She was sitting at the counter, chopping carrots. So, Sophie said, Dad told me he's working the night shift at the Kent warehouse. Is he? I asked, basting the turkey. Yeah, he says it's hard work. His back hurts. But he sounds different, Mom. He sounds humble. He actually asked me about my classes. That's good, honey. He asked if he could come by for dessert, just for an hour. Sophie stopped chopping and looked at me. Is that okay? I know what he did to you. If you say no, I'll tell him to get lost. I wiped my hands on my apron. I looked at my beautiful daughter, who had my eyes and her father's chin. I looked at my life. I was wealthy. I was respected. I was creating technology that changed the world. I was happy. Holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I had already poured the poison out. He can come, I said. But tell him if he touches the thermostat, I'm firing him. Sophie laughed. The doorbell rang an hour later. Greg stood on the porch. He was holding a cheap pumpkin pie from the grocery store. He looked older, tired, and worn down. He wore a simple flannel shirt. But when he saw me, he didn't look through me. He didn't look at me like a checklist item. Hi, Diana, he said. House looks amazing. It does, I said, stepping aside. Come in, Greg. Wipe your feet. He stepped inside the house he used to own, into the life he had thrown away. He walked into the kitchen and hugged Sophie. I watched them. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of wine. I caught my reflection in the window. 46. Lines around the eyes. Soft stomach. I looked fantastic. I took a sip of wine. It was a vintage Greg used to say was too complex for me. Tasted perfect.